Well, hello. It's, let's just say, been a while. Today we're going to talk about a few cars that Volkswagen has made, but not your average VWs like the Passat, because today we're looking at cars that you wouldn't expect a brand like Volkswagen to make. Starting off with the most normal one, the Volkswagen Phaeton. This car was built to compete with cars like Mercedes luxury sedans, and it was built based on the ideas of this guy. And by that, I mean he gave some extremely strict requirements for how the car should be designed. For example, the Phaeton was engineered to maintain a stable inside temperature of 22 degrees Celsius while driving at 300 km an hour in 50-degree external heat, even though it was electronically limited to 250 km an hour. Another one of Ferdinand's Piech requirements was that the car must have a torsional rigidity of 37,000 Nm per degree. And if you don't know what that means, it's a measure of how much a car's structure resists twisting when forces are applied, like when driving over uneven surfaces, cornering hard, or hitting a pothole on one side of the car. But now, let's talk about the most interesting part of this car, the engines. You could buy the Phaeton with a total of 6 different engine options, but since 3 of them are a bit less interesting 6 cylinders, I'll just kindly ignore them. So let's talk about an engine variant that I would consider the most reasonable, a 4.2-liter V8 producing 330 horsepower and 430 Nm of torque. It was available from 2002 to 2016, and I'm mentioning this engine because not only was it more powerful than the previously mentioned 6-cylinder options and still quite reliable, but also it's just cooler to drive a V8. It's a great middle ground between the standard 6-cylinder options and the even bigger engines we're about to get into. Even though owning a V10 powered car sounds really impressive, this one is the most problematic engine of the lineup. The 5-liter V10 TDI is a twin-turbo diesel that produced 330 horsepower and a tractor-like torque of 750 Nm. It was only available in Europe from 2003 to 2007, but be aware, it was known for having a few reliability issues, and by that I mean all those issues. And if you think you can just replace and fix things on this engine by yourself, well, good luck. The engine was squeezed into the engine bay so tightly that even simple repairs often required removing it first, which, as you can imagine, was neither easy nor cheap. But don't worry, there was an alternative to the V10, maybe more expensive to buy, but still, the 6-liter W12 that from 2002 to 2004 produced 414 horsepower, and from 2004 to 2011 it made 444 horsepower. It was available in both Europe and North America. Despite being such a large engine, it was actually quite reliable. However, because of its size, it suffered from the same issue as the V10. Repairs often required removing the engine first due to the lack of space. So how did the Phaeton actually sell? Well, it failed. Even though it was engineered to an incredibly high standards, it was still a luxury sedan with much of a brand known for making cars that aren't really targeted at rich people, and also, it kinda looks like a Passat, especially from the back. Alright, with that out of the way, let's talk about a car that, in a detuned for Phaeton way, shared its engine with that car, and that car is the only supercar to have a Volkswagen badge. This is the Volkswagen W12, also known as the Volkswagen Nardo. It was built at the request of the same guy behind the Volkswagen Phaeton, Ferdinand Piech, who was Volkswagen's CEO at the time, and he gave his request to Giorgetto Giugiaro, and you might know him for designing things like the DMC DeLorean, BMW M1, first-gen Volkswagen Golf, or most importantly, the Iveco City Class Cursor 2141 Loretto. well, back to the topic. This car was developed from 1997 to 2002, so for simplicity, let's draw an arrow and do a little timeline, starting off with the year 1997. A Tokyo Motor Show took place where Volkswagen for the first time presented the Volkswagen W12 Synchro Coupe, with Synchro being the old name Volkswagen used for all-wheel drive. Now they call it 4Motion, and coupe, as you probably already know, meaning a closed-roof, two-door passenger car. And of course, as you can guess by the name, this car was powered by a W12 engine, specifically a 5.6-liter W12 in a mid-engine layout, delivering 414 horsepower through a 6-speed manual transmission to all four wheels. Also, from other cool stuff, it had scissor doors. Another Volkswagen W12, but this time with Roadster in the name, and it's red. Oh, and only rear-wheel drive, and yeah, as you can guess from the name, it's also roofless. During once again the Tokyo Motor Show, where Volkswagen presented yet another version of this car, but this time it was powered by a more powerful 6-liter naturally aspirated W12 engine, producing 600 horsepower and 621 Nm of torque with a top speed of 357 km an hour. And this variant, named the Volkswagen W12 Nardo, was called that because of the Nardo Ring, which is the giant round test track in Italy, and yeah, it was named that for a reason. On the previously mentioned Nardo Ring, Volkswagen conducted a test where the car was driving almost non-stop, stopping only for things like refueling for 24 hours, and for the entirety of that time it was traveling at an average speed of 306 km an hour, which is both impressive and shows the car was actually very reliable. But Volkswagen thought they could do even better. So 4 months later they repeated the test. This time after 24 hours the car reached an average speed of 334 km an hour. And yet Volkswagen didn't put it into production, partly because of the Volkswagen brand image. But since they already went that far, why not go a step further? And that's what they did by creating the Bugatti Veyron 3 years later, in 2005. And even though the Veyron had a different engine, a lot of the research and development from the W12 was used in its development. And as for the W12 engine itself, it ended up in cars like the Audi A8, Bentley Continental GT, and of course the Volkswagen Phaeton I already talked about. In April 2002, Ferdinand Piech, who at the time was leading Volkswagen's management board, decided to present this amazing piece of automotive engineering called the Volkswagen 1-liter concept car by driving it between Wolfsburg and Hamburg to show off to the shareholders during the annual meeting with them. But let's talk about the car he drove. The goal behind designing it was that it would only burn 1 liter of fuel per 100 driven kilometers, and to achieve that they needed better aerodynamics, so the two seats in the car were placed one behind the other, and to reduce the weight the car used a lot of unpainted carbon fiber, and all of the parts were made from lightweight materials, designed to weigh as little as possible. That brought the final weight without passengers to just 290 kilograms. That weight also included all the safety equipment like airbags, pressure sensors, ABS, stability control, and was also designed with crumple zones. And since it didn't weigh much, it didn't need much to get moving. So it was powered by a tiny 1-cylinder 299cc diesel engine, making 8.4 horsepower, which was paired with a 6-speed transmission that worked similarly to a regular one, but it was operated by a computer. And apparently the car succeeded in its goal, burning just 0.99 liters of diesel per 100 kilometers, according to Volkswagen. But the story of this car doesn't end here, because during the 2009 Frankfurt Motor Show, Volkswagen presented the second generation of this car, this time named the Volkswagen L1, and from the things that changed compared to the previous one are weight, with it now weighing 381 kilograms, styling, with it now looking more futuristic, and most importantly, a completely different engine, a hybrid-assisted 800cc inline-2 turbo diesel with the electric motor on itself generating 30.4 horsepower and the entire drivetrain generating 27 horsepower in Eco mode and 39 horsepower in Sport mode. I know that 39 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot, but thanks to its lightweight, that gives power to weight ratio of about 102 horsepower per 1 ton, and that's better than 1 liter EcoBoost Focus, and it was as fast as every grocery getter. So it did 0 to 100 km an hour in 40.3 seconds and had a top speed of 158 km an hour. During that time, Volkswagen probably realized that previous 1-liter cars they made were closer to those microcars that 14-year-olds can drive in Europe, so they decided to make it more like a full-grown car. So during the 2011 Qatar Motor Show, they presented this, the Volkswagen XL1, and to make it more car-like, the seats were finally placed almost normally. And I'm saying almost because the passenger seat is placed further back than the driver's seat for some reason, and for better aerodynamics, the mirrors were replaced with cameras, so to see what's going on around you, you needed to look at those little screens. But there were also some changes to the drivetrain. It was still an 800cc hybrid assisted turbo diesel that used a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, but now its power rose to a total of 47 horsepower, delivered to the rear wheels. It now also weighed a lot more, because its total weight rose to 795 kilograms. But you could still achieve a top speed of 158 km an hour, and actually, it accelerated faster than the previous one, with its 0 to 100 being about 12 seconds, and according to Volkswagen, it achieved a fuel consumption of 0.9 liters per 100 kilometers. The amazing fuel economy that Volkswagen said the XL1 had actually could now be independently verified, because during the 2013 Geneva Motor Show, Volkswagen presented the production version of this car, which wasn't that different from the one presented 2 years ago, but it had more power, with a total of 68 horsepower, and it did have a fuel economy of 0.9 liters. If you really tried. By that, I mean you needed to have it in eco mode and adapt your driving to get as good of a fuel economy as possible. And if you didn't care about the fuel economy at all, so if you had the AC on and just drove it normally, you would get about 2.3 liters per 100 kilometers. The production of this one began in mid-2013 and it lasted till 2016, and Volkswagen produced about 250 XL1s, but sold only 200 and only in Europe. The other 50 were used for testing and etc. And these cars were not very cheap, because to buy one new you needed to pay about 110,000 euros back then, and adjusting this for inflation, that's about 137,500 in today's money. So you got a fuel economy better than a moped and all the comforts of sitting inside a car, but you paid the price of 3 average new cars in the US, or the price of 87 mopeds. But even though it's not very cheap, it's still a very cool car. And actually, that's not all about this car, because while searching for photos and etc. of this car for a YouTube short about it, I found out about this, and this is the Volkswagen XL Sport. And in short, in 2014, a motor show in Paris was taking place where Volkswagen presented said car as one-of-one concept cars, which compared to the original XL1 was no longer a hybrid, nor a diesel one, because now it was powered by a Ducati Superleggera V2 bike engine producing about 200 horsepower and revved all the way to 11,000 RPM, going through a 7-speed DSG transmission and giving it a 0 to 100 time of 5.7 seconds with a top speed of 270 km an hour. And this car, from what I know, is quite rarely talked about, which is both not surprising and kinda sad, because well, it's hard to find any reliable information about this car, and it would be nice for it to receive more attention, knowing that the normal XL1 is often called out for looking like a supercar but not having a performance of one, which the XL1 Sport does, and yet no one really talks about it. Now, since all the previously mentioned by me cars were made with in some way involvement of Ferdinand Piech, so let's talk about something that he wasn't involved in any way, and that something is this thing, the Volkswagen thing, also referred to as the Volkswagen Type 181 or 182, with Type 182 just being its right-hand drive variant for markets like the UK, but let's start from the beginning. In 1960, a few European countries united to create a vehicle called Europa Jeep, with a goal of it being cheap, lightweight, reliable four-wheel drive car that would be perfect for military use and mass production. But the creation of this vehicle would be time-consuming, and the West German military needed something lightweight and cheap now. So Volkswagen, after receiving the proposition of making such vehicle, decided to decline it. But eventually, the management of Volkswagen realized that they can produce it as a normal consumer car to fulfill the needs of countries with rougher roads, where it could do better than the already well-known Type 1, and to reduce costs of making such vehicle, it was mostly based on Beetle parts, but also its chassis based on the Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, and with that the Volkswagen thing started its production in 1968 for military use at first, and the production of it for civilian use started in 1971 and lasted till 1983, with most of these being made in Germany and Mexico. They made about 90,000 units. But let's talk about the car from the perspective of a consumer and what it had to offer. Starting off with the outside, where you can see it kinda looks like something a 5-year-old would draw. Also, since it was a convertible, you had an option to fold the roof down, and you could do the same to the windshield, for some unknown reason. But well, you could do that. And also, if you wanted to open the side windows, then well, you couldn't. But you could just take them out. And on the inside, the car was as simple as you can imagine, with some basic gauges, simple switches, and this car also offered an engine, a 1.5 liter air-cooled flat 4, which later became a 1.6 liter, paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. And this engine, just like many other things on this car, was taken from the Beetle. And just like the said Beetle, it was a rear-engined, rear-wheel drive car which made 44 horsepower and could reach a top speed of about 110 km an hour. And it's important to note that even though I'm calling this car a Volkswagen thing, it's actually known under many names around the world. For example, in Mexico, it's called Safari, in UK, Tracker, in Italy, Pescatia, in Indonesia, Kamat, and finally, in the US, Thing. And to buy one now, they go for about 30–40,000 US dollars. And so finally, let's talk about a Volkswagen car that I personally found as the most interesting. Shall I present to you the Volkswagen GX3? If you look at it, you might think it's something quite modern, but you'd be wrong, because it actually is over 90 years old, which goes to show that the modern design of it actually looked like something that could have existed in the future. But I think it looks kinda goofy from the front, with one headlight being bigger than the other. But let's talk about how this car was made, and I actually don't know if it can be classified as a car, because unlike a normal car, it only has 3 wheels. But anyway, it was built by the Volkswagen Moonraker team, which specialized in doing projects aimed at the American market, and also they avoided normal Volkswagen design style, so whatever they'd make would be special, and the GX3 is their most famous creation. First presented in January 2006 during the LA Auto Show, where it was told that if it was going to reach the production, it would cost 70,000 US dollars or less, which in today's money is about 27,000 US dollars. Its goal was to be an affordable entry-level sports car for sunny weekend, which offered good performance for its price. And talking about performance, it was powered by the same engine as the Volkswagen Lupo GTI, which was a 1.6-liter inline-4, producing about 125 horsepower and 152 Nm. In the case of the GX3, powering the rear wheel through a 6-speed manual transmission, which also thanks to its weight, only weighing 570 kg, allowed it to accelerate from 0 to 100 km an hour in 5.7 seconds and reach a top speed of 200 km an hour. And this car's frame was made with the help of Lotus, a British company that we all probably recognize with sports cars. Also, this car used a double wishbone suspension in the front, and this gave the car the title of the most fun VW, but Volkswagen ended up deciding not to put it into production for a reason as simple as the fact that they realized that people might get into a car crash, and giving them a car with no roof, no windshield, no airbags, no crumple zones, and an overall weird structure gave a lot of room for losing lawsuits against the people that may have an accident in it. And since doing the improvements would make this car way more expensive than $70,000, they decided to scrap the idea, which is quite a pity, especially because cars similar to it were made, like the Polaris Slingshot or a Campagna T-Rex. And well, with that, we made it to the end of this video. And of course, there are many more interesting vehicles made by Volkswagen that I'm hoping to talk about in the future. But with that, thanks for watching and hopefully see you in the next one.